I'm going to leave it to David to introduce Nick because he knows much more about him than I do and knows him well too. So I'm sure you can be much more. You can say much more than I could, David. So
well, it's finding another book you've written. It's a great pleasure to welcome our speaker Nick Caistor back to our group. I think you've spoken to us twice before. The last time was on Colombia.
Yeah.
Can you remember?
I remember that one.
And I've got your book.
Oh,
that's you translated, Born to Die in Medellin. And I remember the Latin American Bureau. That takes me back. Is it still going?
You've still got
really?
40 years next year.
Well, Nick is a translator, as you probably guessed, a journalist and an author of non-fiction books. He's translated about 40 books using Spanish, Portuguese and French. And his work has received critical acclaim, and he's recently written a short biography of Che Guevara, which follows up on the biography of Fidel Castro. Am I right?
Yeah, no,
absolutely. Getting all these things. And he's recently also written a cultural history of Mexico City and one of Buenos Aires. So you see he's well plugged into Central and South America. As well as that, he's presented programmes on BBC Radio 4 and the World Service.
I worked with the World Service for 15 years.
Quite a lot about the World Service on the news tonight. So who better to talk about the subject of Mexico following the recent contribution he's made with his wife Amanda Hopkinson to the book Sorrows of Mexico. We've heard a lot about Mexico, most of it highly unfavourable in the recent press and recent elections somewhere. About walls and Mexico, so perhaps some of that as well. So welcome, Nick.
Okay, thanks very much. Thank you. I thought I'd get you to do some work first. It's always difficult speaking to a group like this to work out how much you actually know about Mexico. So here, there are 10 basic questions.
Oh, it's a quiz, I don't know.
Well, no, it's your quiz and chips this weekend. It's getting you in the mood. But with your neighbour, perhaps, between the two of you, there's just 10 very simple questions about Mexico to get you to sort out the two of you. There's lots of misconceptions about Mexico and lots of people think, I've only ever been to Mexico, I should have started with that. Holiday, or you live there? Here are you doing? That's usually you win. I really like to cheat. Oh yeah. So you two. Okay. Hello. Why don't you come down here? I've given them 10 basic questions about Mexico to answer. No prize for the winner. Well, maybe there will be this Saturday. All right. Would you like to come here and look at this with him to answer the questions? Are you Mexican?
No.
Indian?
When was it?
Which? Sri Lanka? Malay, yeah. Are you looking at it with this gentleman? he could help you when he's finished.
I think it's too late.
Hello.
Okay. I don't know any of the answers except the first one. I don't know any of the answers except the
Oh,
first
two
one.
more. Okay, that's good. I've got ten basic questions on Mexico. This lady can. Have you got a chair for her?
So I guess
There's one more there.
There's one more there.
One more there.
Mexico, Central America.
Could I give you one sheet or two? Three.
Yes. Do you know the answer to these questions? We've actually missed out quite a Sharing it further now.
well, I was going to say, would like to
Actually, I think
No, it's two o'clock today. And after, where is it? How many people live?
I think this is 1908. As we believe, Mr. Trump will be right. It's probably 3 million.
Yeah.
There's something I'm trying to track down.
Okay.
If you live in Mexico.
I haven't seen one in America.
No.
No, I don't really.
It's just that you
Yes.
I don't know the answer.
Latin America.
Yeah, I don't know what's
And then
happening.
he's got
What is
Yes.
like the what's the name? Ruling party or something?
The winners get a bag of chips on Saturday. Tortillas, yeah.
Alright, you know this.
well, that's
And after I've got
We're guessing a lot.
That's good. You done it? Okay. That's all right. The others haven't finished yet. Don't worry. I've got. Yeah, they're not random questions. They're all to do with human rights.
I think it's...
You got them all?
Turned upside down, the answer is no.
well, I think
What's this thing?
I was just talking about that.
That's from the Amnesty report, annual report for this last year.
You see why people want to go to America, even America.
Done? Everybody's puffing and blowing. They're not entirely random questions. They seem to be all have to do with the human rights situation. So I'll try and lead them back towards that. Hello. It's all right. It's okay.
We've got it on time. You just missed it.
No, I've got a copy for him.
well, you come prepared.
That's what we're looking at now. Now, our esteemed friend who presented me got it wrong, didn't he? Where is Mexico?
North America.
It's North America. You said South America.
But I said
Central?
Central.
Is it central?
It's not north.
No, it's not.
It's north. It's North America. It's not South America, it's not Central America, it's North America. And this is very important for Mexicans. They don't want to feel that they're South American, and they hate it when people say, oh, these South Americans. They're not. They're not Central Americans either. It used to be part of Mexico, Guatemala, El Salvador, Nicaragua. Used to be part of America, but split off in the 19th century. And they're very proud of being North American, which means that they don't look so much south as north. And of course you know who's immediately north of them, the United States, with however many thousand miles border it is, and then Canada. And so if in the 21st century Mexicans like to compare themselves to the United States, to Canada, rather than to all the countries south of them, this causes tremendous difficulties. I said I was trying to relate these questions back to human rights situation. This is one of the chief problems of Mexico, that there's this pull constantly to the north. There's the pull for people to go for a better life in the United States and Canada, and to cross the border and to get there and to live the American dream. And at the same time, it means that Mexico is in the middle for all the people from mostly Central America who want to also get to the United States and use Mexico as the path through to get to the border and to get illegally into the United States. In recent years there have been several horrific incidents. There's a thing called the Train of Death, which goes up from Guatemala up to the border with the United States through Mexico. And there have been several horrific incidents where smugglers of people have taken people from Guatemala, from El Salvador, on this train, but couldn't be bothered to try and get them across the border illegally, and so just shot them, and their bodies have been discovered in sort of 50, 100 women, children, men, in big pits close to the border, because the smugglers couldn't be bothered to take the risk. There's this pressure the whole time of, are we really part of North America? If we are we equal to the United States? Well, we've seen it in the United States elections, how they're not regarded as equal. And the other problem that this creates for Mexico is, it's a bit like the reverse of Great Britain. There's a tremendous pull of Mexicans from the poorer south, which is also much more indigenous, the Mayan Indians and lots of other Indian groups still in the south, who want to go to the north of Mexico because there are more jobs there, because they can earn better there. So that makes the south even more poor and more open to conflict, because they can see that people further north are better off than them, and that creates again human rights problems in states like Oaxaca, Chiapas, and so on. The other thing about Mexico that causes problems for it is that it's got both the Pacific and the Atlantic coastlines. And this becomes a problem in the whole drugs situation, because it means that there's all those different places that you can bring ships from Colombia, from South America with the drugs in, on both sides of the continent, so it's very easy for those drugs then to be channeled to the United States. So, one wrong.
Yeah.
Not South America, not Central America, North American. How many people live in Mexico? What did you have for that?
I put 80 million.
80 million?
We said about 60 million.
50 million.
You've been there. How many did you meet? Mike?
Should I guess 50 million?
What do you think?
150.
You see, he's more like it. This is the extraordinary thing as well. When I first went to Mexico, which is now 40 years ago, so in the mid-1970s, the population was something equivalent to that of the United Kingdom, 65 million. In those 40 years, it's gone up to 125 million. So it's doubled in size in what sort of 2 generations. And we always talk here about the pressure on all our infrastructure and schools and everything if you increase by a few 100,000. But to have a population double in 40 years, you can imagine what pressure that creates on everything, and how to police, how to cater for these people, how to educate them, how to house them, all the kind of problems that we discuss, but on a level that's so completely different from what you find in a lot of, not just Mexico, a lot of developing countries. For example, Brazil, again, thinking back 40 years, Brazil had 100 million inhabitants, and now 210. So again, we're talking of populations doubling in 2 generations, and all the problems that fact creates, and all these people looking for work, wanting to be educated, wanting to have their place as well and have their rights respected. And of those 125 million then, how many do you think live in the United States? What did you get for that? Did you know? Did you make a guess?
Did we guess?
10 or 11.
10 or 11? Any advance?
22.
22, you know that, do you?
No.
Okay. Okay.
That was Carl, actually.
Any advance on 22?
25.
25? What did you have at the back?
12, I thought.
12?
Probably near that.
It's actually 35 million.
Is it?
So it's an extraordinary number, isn't it? Again, you think that's almost half the population of Britain, Mexicans living in the United States. And of those, 11 million are new residents, but 23 million are born there in the United States, but still regard themselves as Mexican. So although Trump gets it completely wrong, there is a question there about Mexicans and the United States and the relation all the time that causes problems. What's its government? That's a rather abstruse one.
Is it a federation?
Yes, that's what I was getting at, really. We think of the United States of America, but it's also the United States of Mexico. And just as, again, we've seen in the recent election, California is very different from New Hampshire or Ohio or whatever. Mexico's got 32 states. A lot of them very different. A lot of them with very different worries, a lot of them with very different structures, and a lot of them with very different challenges. But in terms of human rights, it creates a problem in that each state is a kind of law unto itself. Each state it's got its own laws, its own governor, and that might not agree with what's coming out of Mexico City, which is, like in the United States, it's a federal district, although it's going to become a state next year, I think. And the problem is how that centre controls all these different states, which can be going in different directions. And of course, one of the main problems, two main problems, one, corruption on the level of state employees, but also on the level of justice and policing. The federal system is very weak in Mexico, which means that each state has its own police force, has its own legal system, and there's no real combination of all these. They're not merged to make one coherent force, if you like. There's no such thing as the FBI in Mexico, though they're talking of trying to set that up now, which again leads to a lot of corruption, it leads to a lot of local problems. You have the very strong towns, and then the states, and then the federal thing is very fuzzy around the side, although it is presidential and it does have two chambers in the Congress that meets, in the federal Congress that meets in the capital. But each state also has its own assembly, its own legislative assembly. So that complicates things as well, and they've never managed to really integrate everything into one real unity. Again, you see it on the level of policing, and you see it on the level of the legal system and of corruption. When was the Mexican Revolution? I thought you might all know that.
1910.
There you go, you see, see why he's the chairman. Yeah. 1910. How long did it last, you know?
10 years.
It was about 10 years, they reckon, 1910 to 1920. And about 1 million Mexicans were killed in the aftermath. You've probably all heard of Zapata and Pancho Villa, who were leaders of the rebels. But this, in a sense, created the climate of violence and of people taking the law into their own hands when they had political demands. And so many people were uprooted from that. So many people were killed. So many families split. And the conflict between the countryside and the cities and the towns was so great that effect has lasted ever since, that violence is the way to push your political demands. You get a gun and you go and shoot someone. It seems to have continued since then. So more than 100 years now, this attitude that if you want something done, you get a gun and go and shoot someone. But the other thing is the PRI. What is SIX? What is the PRI?
Institutional Revolutionary Party.
There you go. A complete contradiction in terms. Out of that revolution, because it was caused such conflict and so many deaths and so much upheaval, the party or the movement that managed to steady it became known as the Institutional Revolutionary Party, which is very odd if you think about it. How do you get an institution out of a revolution? But what they did was, it's a broad movement that incorporated everyone. That was the way that they managed to bring peace. They offered everybody something. They tried to be something for everyone. And at the same time, they were very nationalist. It was under them in the 1930s that they nationalized the oil industry. Anything under the ground in Mexico belongs to the Mexican state. So the PRI set up in 1929 under a different name, but the thing was that the PRI stayed in power from then, 1929, until the year 2000. So there's a complete confusion between government and state. The PRI operated always as both. We're both the government, but we're also the state. And the state of Mexico was created in the image of the PRI. Nationalist, strong unions, but state-controlled unions, and trying to offer everyone something, but at the same time, if you have a government in power for 70 years, you know very well that the levels of corruption were incredible. Just everybody was corrupt, and the only way to deal with it was by money, by bribes, or by favours. Because the other thing that came out of the revolution was, yes, everybody could vote, and there was not to be re-election. You couldn't have a president having more than one term, and the presidential term is set at 6 years. And on the one hand, that seems like a good idea to have re-election so you don't get the problems of corruption and things that involves. But it also means that in those 6 years, that person knows that he's got 6 years to make his fortune. And that's what's happened time and again. Not only at the level of the president, but all the people he brings in, all the people who back him in Congress, all the people in the civil service, he brings people in. They were known as parachutists. He used to parachute the people in always to all the important offices and all the legal sections of the society. Which led to a huge amount, again, of corruption and a way of doing things that everybody knows was wrong, and led to this word that is in the Amnesty report, this impunity. People can get away with anything in Mexico. I don't know if it happened to you, but if you get stopped by the police for speeding or anything, you know very well that you're not going to be taken to the police station. That's what they say, they're going to take you to the police station, but you know very well the thing to do is to give them your driving license with a 100 peso note in it, and that's it. It's on every level, from that of the traffic cop upwards. They expect to be bribed, they expect corruption. That's the way things work, and that's what the PRI fostered, if you like, over that long period of time in power. Because not only did each president rob for 6 years, but the way of selecting the next president was not like what we've just seen in the United States, for good or ill, but the president in power, they call it not democracy, but dedocracy. He pointed with his finger about who his successor would be, and it would be a man. Dedocracy. it was called, so you knew who the next president was going to be, and of course that meant that the same thing carried on time and time again. This ended in the year 2000, so they've been in power for over 70 years. I'm sort of talking a bit of a horror story about Mexico, but they have made efforts to join the modern world, if you like, to assert that they are North Americans, that things are different. And one of the things that changed in the late 90s was the end of this government by the PRI. In the year 2000, the opposition got in for the first time in all that length of time. The right-wing opposition, the Partido de Acción Nacional. But again, this goes back to the level of the states. The PRI, because it had been in power for so many years, still stayed in power in all the different states. And so the PAN could act centrally and do things, but didn't have any effect on ordinary people's lives very much. And then, as I said, the presidential period is 6 years. In 2006, the right wing again won, the PAN won, and a man called Felipe Calderón became president. And people were looking for change, looking for the fact that now an opposition had been in power not just once but twice, thought that the old order was going to change completely. But Calderón made the big mistake of declaring war on the drug cartels, of declaring open war on the drug cartels, and bringing the army, the navy, in to attack the drug cartels wherever they could find them. And this led to something like 50,000 deaths in his 6 years in power. We're dealing in numbers in Mexico which are just quite extraordinary in many ways. And it also terrorized a lot of ordinary citizens when they saw the army on their streets or the Marines on their streets fighting openly with drug cartel people. He felt he was forced to do that because of the corruption at all levels. If you have police officers or people in the legal system who are only earning $50 a month, and from drug trafficking you can earn, 100 times that? How are you going to keep any non-corrupt police force, any security force at all, honest if you can earn so much more illegally than you can legally? So his attempt was to we'll forget about all the police forces, we'll bring in the army. But that only made things much worse, because as soon as the army began attacking the drugs cartels, again thanks to that border with North America, they just went to Texas and got even heavier weapons, and it became a real bloodbath in many places in Mexico. What is NAFTA? Number 7. We're getting through them.
Free trade?
North American, North American Free Trade Association. This, again, as I've been stressing, Mexico feels itself part of North America, and this was seen, it finally came into, became law in 1st of January 1994. So free trade between Canada, the United States and Mexico. And it has helped a lot, because tariff, it's lowering the customs tariffs on lots of Mexican goods. But it was significant that on that very day that it came into effect, there was a rebellion in Mexico. Do any of you remember that?
Chiapas, the Zapatistas.
Yeah, the Zapatistas, we heard of them in the south. The Zapatistas rejected it, but rejected it violently. They took over villages and several hundred people were killed. They're still there, but have withdrawn within their own safe territory now. But again, it's this illustration that Mexico really is at least 2 Mexicos, if not 32 Mexicos. The far south in Chiapas is very poor, very indigenous, and they felt that they were getting nothing. They would get nothing from NAFTA, from any free trade agreement with the United States. And so there's that tension as well between people who don't want to be part of this larger community, but want Mexico to solve its own problems internally. And it also, this NAFTA, again increased the flow, the pressure up on that northern border, the pressure of people who wanted to go to the United States. We've had a big discussion now after Brexit, the freedom of movement of labour, but that's also supposed to be part of NAFTA. But as you've heard from Trump, he wants to stop that. But as we've seen, millions of Mexicans come and go across the border, trying to work there, trying to live there, and improve their lives. So NAFTA, as well as benefiting Mexico economically, it's also further split the country in two, really, the north and the south. The north gets the benefits. You've got cities like Monterrey, which are very thriving, and the south, which feels more and more abandoned. Again, I read, I think just last month, that Ford was considering, that the car makers were considering moving all the production of its smaller cars to Mexico, which again is what the things that Trump is getting about. It was going to move all its operations to the northern border with Mexico because it's so much cheaper there, so much easier. That's the kind of tensions there are. But the other tension is something like the maquiladoras. What are they? Have you met that word? Did anybody know it? Maquiladora? No? Nobody? No? Bag of chips? Fries? No?
Resistance fighters.
No. The maquiladoras are these small, or sometimes very large, industrial units that spring up along the border with the United States. So the Mexicans are employed in them, and it's very easy to get all the goods into the United States. Typically it's called maquiladora because that's a weaving machine, I think. A lot of them is clothes or very cheap goods like that are produced along that sort of strip just below the North American border. Again, attracting people to there because in the hope of employment. It employs several million Mexicans there, lots of them women. This is typical employment for women. And the sort of the link to the human rights situation is the fact that a lot of these women come from the south or have left their families and so are working in these factories but are on their own and are unprotected. And I know Amnesty's done work on it and lots of people, a place called Ciudad Juarez, which is across from, I can't remember what it is in the States, El Paso, just across from El Paso. And in Ciudad Juarez, for the last 15 years, there's been hundreds and hundreds of cases of femicide, of the killing of women, and mostly of these single women who'd come there to work in the maquiladoras, and nobody knows who they are, they haven't got documents, so it's very easy to kill them and get rid of them. Have you not seen about Ciudad Juarez? Yeah. It became very famous, very infamous.
Why are they killing them?
Well, a lot of it, there's a seat here, drugs related, sex related, and unfortunately there's this dreaded word machismo as well, that women's lives are worth, or women are worth far less than men's still, and it doesn't really matter if you kill a woman. All that is mixed in. So that's another human rights problem, if you like, when you get workers on their own, female workers on their own in these towns that spring up around these places that do sewing or producing whatever, and again, the Mexican state is not really protecting these people. The Zetas, has anyone heard of the Zetas? Sorry, I haven't got one for you. What does Zeta mean? It just means Z. But this is typical of what's going on. I said earlier that I worked for the BBC World Service, and one of the stories I went to Mexico to do, to a state called Morelia, was because of the Zetas. These people were originally an elite unit of the army brought in to fight the drugs people. They then thought, hang on, I'm earning whatever it was, $100 a month to fight them. and the guys in charge of the drugs are offering me $2,000 a month to be on their side. So it was a group that was discovered, was recruiting from within the army the whole time, creating this special force that was meant to be attacking the cartels, but was fighting on their side. And the reason I went there is a particularly gruesome story that, as a warning, these Cetas chopped the heads off 6 people and threw them into a dance hall. So you have these 6 heads rolling around in the middle of the dance floor. And I went there and it was true. So it's that kind of level, as a warning, of course, to other people that they're in the position of power and everybody has to do as they say, or the same will happen to them. And that's the kind of level of violence that you meet in Mexico, in lots of the parts that are taken over by the drug cartels. So you're all looking cheerful, aren't you? These are the kind of problems that are faced in Mexico, and these are the problems that the Mexican government is not responding to at all. The Mexican government, which again from 2012 onwards is back with the PRI, so they've gone back into their old habits of just corruption and, oh, there's nothing wrong here, if you attack us you just hate us because we're Mexican. It's the old nationalism has come back with a vengeance. But again, nothing has changed in terms of the human rights situation. If anything, it's got worse. At the end there you'll see just what Amnesty International said in its 2015 report. And the main thing it talks about is impunity. Impunity persisted for grave human rights violations, including torture and other ill treatment, enforced disappearances and extrajudicial executions. More than 27,000 people remain missing or disappeared. 27,000, you know? That's not counting the Central Americans. There must be another 20,000 of them. So, as David mentioned, MacLeod's press in Britain, and has sold it in different countries now, we brought out this book called The Sorrows of Mexico, trying to document the 7, again Amnesty concentrates quite a bit on threats to journalists and writers, and lots of them have died over the last, well, ever since the revolution. But seven prominent writers writing about the cases of just human rights violations and the difficulties in Mexico of getting the rule of law to operate at all levels. I could go through the different cases, but number 10 is the one that I wanted to concentrate on. Ayotzinapa, does that word mean anything to you? Ayotzinapa, it's a difficult word. It's a town or a village. It's a village in one of these states called Guerrero. Any of you know the most famous city in Guerrero? Acapulco. So on the coast of Guerrero is this famous international seaside resort. But in the mountains inside Guerrero, it's south of Mexico City, so it's very poor, poverty-stricken, mountainous, the kind of mountains where you can grow drugs, where you can grow opium or cocaine, coca, to be produced there. It's also, as a mountainous region, south, it's also got a strong tradition of, I think that was where Zapata came from. It's a strong tradition of rebelliousness, of people revolting against Mexico City, of taking up arms against them, and is regarded with a lot of suspicion by the federal government. Now this Ayotzinapa case illustrates something of what I've been saying. Does anybody know what happened in Mexico City in 1968?
There's a murder of
85 was the
Olympics, and there was also the murder of about 1,000 students.
Yeah.
protesting against the
Yes.
Olympics.
It was the Olympics, the famous Olympics that were staged at 8,000 feet up, so there were lots of records and things. But just before it, in the summer before it, there had been lots of student protests about the Olympics, about political demands of the students, about wanting more freedom, and these had been repressed throughout the summer. And then at one particular incident in October 1968, there was a massacre. Again, 500 or 1,000, nobody knows how many people were killed. All the students were together in a square in Mexico City, and the police just gunned them down. So that happened in October 1968. It's still commemorated by students these days. They come from all over the country to Mexico City to march and to protest against this and to say, well, what's changed in 50 years? Very little, in fact. And Ayotzinapa, just outside it, in a small village, there's an agricultural training college where very poor students go for 2 years to learn agriculture, to learn how to develop their land or whatever. These are very poor students. It's not like our universities, really. They have to support themselves. They sleep on mats on the floor. It's very simple education, but at least it's an education for people from 16 to 20, something like that. And in October 2 years ago, some of these students hijacked buses, local buses from the town of Iguala. And again, this is something that happens every year, and everybody knows it's going to happen. They take over buses and drive to Mexico City. And the transport companies sort of know that's one of the risks of their business, but it's usually done without violence. The driver, they either get rid of the driver or they get him to drive them to Mexico City. But what happened on this particular night 2 years ago, the students took over 3, I think it was, or 4 buses, and started to drive, wanted to drive up to Mexico City. They went to the town of Iguala to get more of their mates to join in. At some point on that same evening, they were stopped by the police, and 43 of them disappeared. 43. You know, it's not an insignificant number. 43 students in a teacher's training college disappeared. The government, the central government, their story was, oh yes, the students were intercepted by members of a drug cartel because there were drugs on one of the buses that were being transported without their knowledge. The members of the drugs cartel shot all of these students, took their bodies, put them in a rubbish dump and incinerated them. All 43. And that is the government's story of what happened to these 43 Ayotzinapa students. But in the time since then, there's been no remains have been found. One person's remains have been found. So how can you make 43 bodies disappear on a rubbish heap, burning them so that there's absolutely nothing left? The government also claims that it's entirely the responsibility of the drugs cartels. But people who lived in that town said no, they saw the police intercept these buses and start shooting at the students when the students started running away. So the impunity, no one has been put on trial for this yet. No one has been declared suspect. Well, several people have been declared suspect, but there has been no government lead on trying to find out what has happened. There was an independent investigation by something called the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, which looked into it and completely disregarded the government version. They said there's no remains in this rubbish dump. Where have you put the 43 bodies? How are you saying that they were taken there and shot and got rid of like that? Can't be true. We've heard that the police were involved. We haven't heard anything from the drugs cartels. Nobody's claimed responsibility. And yet nothing has happened. In fact, what has happened is that the government dismissed this investigation committee as being foreigners getting mixed up in Mexican affairs with a political agenda, where it's their political agenda that is in question. So nothing has happened. But in fact, well, several things have happened. In fact, when the different teams were looking for these 43 bodies, they turned up 10 other mass graves with more than 300 people in them. Again, unknown. Nobody knew how they died, why they died, when they died. So that's sort of like 400 people who've gone missing, disappeared, part of the 27,000 that he's mentioned there. People can just vanish like that, not be accounted for, and no one feels they have to account for it. That's the kind of level of impunity. No one was sacked. Well, sorry, no, I'm being wrong again. The local town mayor was sacked, and the governor fell as well of that state of Guerrero. And the reason I said at the beginning the corruption is so widespread, that governor was from the opposition party, the left-wing opposition. So it's not just the PRI, it's not just the people in power in the centre of Mexico, in Mexico City, who engage in this game. It's the whole lot of them. They're all corrupt, they all see the life of their ordinary citizens as worthless, and they're not willing to face up to the truth. And that's what we've been trying to illustrate in this book, which is 7 or 8 examples of different levels of this kind of corruption, but impunity and lies, official lies that you get in Mexico all the time. I used to report throughout Latin America, but I got so fed up, like a lot of my correspondent friends who lived in Mexico, you can never get a straight answer from a Mexican. Every one of them lies. It's extraordinary to try and establish the truth. And this has become ingrained in the whole way of life. Lots of brave people, particularly writers and journalists, are trying to fight against that, trying to establish the truth. There's a very good chapter in here where a woman called Annabel Hernandez goes back to this Ayotzinapa massacre and just goes through hour after hour. She actually went to the place and talked to people who saw what happened, who took in some students who were running away, which completely destroys the government version of it. And she now has had to leave the country. I think I'll stop there.
Thank you.
I'm giving you a picture of Mexico.
I'm sure people have questions.
Yeah, sure.
If you talked about the importance of the border with the US, Mexico City itself is one of the largest cities in the world.
Yeah.
Is that an attraction as well, like London is in this country, in the sense that everybody sort of migrates to a great centre? Is it the same in...
Yes, it is. It's a bit like London. Central Mexico City's got about 8 million, but around it there are another 12 million, so there's 21 million altogether. And this does attract as a huge magnet. Strangely, or maybe not strangely, because that is a sort of centre of power, the city has been protected from the drugs violence quite a lot. You don't find that kind of drug cartels fighting over Mexico City. They just buy tower blocks there and things. And on that level, Mexico City is safer than a lot of the smaller cities. But of course, there's everyday violence there. Again, people tend to rob with a gun. And there's a high level of homicide there. Yeah.
Can I just ask about the Catholic Church, because it is a Catholic country normally. I mean, does it have high profile? I mean, what does it speak out? I mean,
it does, and I think that Amnesty has just had an urgent action about a priest was abducted and then found alive, but he'd been tortured. The history of the church in Mexico would take another hour. But it is interesting that, again, it goes back to the revolution, which was anti-religious. And the nationalism, the pre-government, was very anti the Catholic Church. For many years, priests weren't allowed to wear their robes outside the churches. That there should be no public show of religion whatsoever. Wasn't it Pope John the 23rd who went there in the 80s to kind of seal the pact, to make it all right again, to make it tolerance by the state authorities. But it's been very anti-religious. But there have been very brave Catholic priests in the south who have spoken up for human rights, particularly in Chiapas with the Zapatistas and that. But on the whole, it's not very prominent in that, as it is in some other countries in Latin America. Yeah.
David, are the elections free elections, state elections and national elections?
Well, they're fairly free. People usually they have international observers who say that yes, things are carried out freely. But again, there's lots of buying of votes, and there's lots of the whole system, again inherited from the revolution, of local bosses who have everybody who follows them, and that hasn't broken down at all, really.
So there's no possibility of a mass movement that wants to really radically change and appeal to the electorate over the whole country?
There is a left-wing party. They call themselves the Party of the Democratic Revolution as opposed to the Institutional Revolution, and they reckon they were robbed of the elections in 1988 and again in 1994. But again, as I said, the governor of the state where that massacre took place was from that party. So it seems like they're just it's pot and kettle. It seems that they're just as bad as the other. They want power for its own sake. This is a constant problem in Mexico. You get a movement that tries to bring honesty, that tries to put an end to impunity, that tries to change things, and they very, very quickly either the leaders are killed or they're bought off. The PRI's power of buying people off is extraordinarily large. Yeah.
Just to prove that things haven't changed very much, you talked about the students being killed in 1968, the year of the Olympics. Yeah. I've just been reading something getting some information for a talk I'm giving, and the Rio Olympics were in August this year, and for the year before in Rio State there was something like well over 500 mainly young poor black men who were killed by police in one state, the Rio State, to clean up the streets and get rid of people who they thought were to spoil the Olympics.
Yeah, it's this thing of some people's lives are seen as worthless, aren't they? But I think it's important for Amnesty that Mexico is, I think that's why I started where I did. Mexico is a place that does take note of international opinion, because it wants to be seen as modern and as part of North America and to be like the United States and Canada. Amnesty International can work by having appeals, by making urgent actions, by putting pressure, by trying to get them to react. Some people there are trying to change things, and it's one of those countries. It's not North Korea. You can affect things, I think.
I was just sorry. Go on.
I mean, your description of the Mexican people is that it doesn't. You've not described a situation where the majority or 50% of the people are unhappy with the situation, but a situation where everyone is sort of conniving. It makes Eastern European sort of Stasi states seem like quite benign. Is that really the case, that either the people either don't care or that they care but they really have they can't do anything?
Yeah, I think it's that they do care, but by the time they're no longer students or whatever, it's been knocked out of them in many ways. There's nothing they can do about it. The pressures for things to remain the same and as corrupt as always are so huge. I didn't mean to make the Mexicans seem as if they're, I don't know, conniving, everybody conniving in it. I don't think so. But,
it describes a sort of an immoral society.
Yeah, no, it is. I think it is, unfortunately. Yeah, I think like the Brazilian one is, as we're finding out more and more. There's the statistics saying that third of the money, state money that was going into the Mexican health system, public health system, had gone in bribes and in corruption and had not reached the people it was meant to reach. A third of it, you know. And people just expect that, you know, shrug their shoulders, and that's what it is. Pass the tequila. But no, I must insist that it's not always like that. It's not all like that. Mexicans are wonderful people. I've had a wonderful time there, always. And it's one of these situations where you think, well, how do we get out of this? How can you get out of this?
I was going to say, it sounded, until you said that they do respond to public opinion, I was going to say it just sounds like a completely lost cause, because, I mean, normally we deal with situations where there is authority, but it's being abused. But it sounds as if, you know, if there isn't any authority, you know, how can you possibly, you know,
I think. Well, that's why you're members of Amnesty. You do think things can be helped to change, don't you? There are honest people in Mexico. There might even be an honest politician. I'm not sure, but the pressures are very great. I've tried to outline some of them. I haven't mentioned drugs because that's what everybody always talks about. But of course, there's that all the time as well. Sorry.
So, to what extent or perhaps they haven't. To what extent have things got much worse since, say, the early 1990s? Have they got much worse?
Yes, well, I tried to illustrate that by the open war on drugs. That really, the violence hit people. Before that, they thought that the drugs wars were just between people involved in it, and they were outside it. But this brought everybody really into it. And in that sense, they have got worse. For all the pressures that I described at the beginning. But there are also attempts to make things better. The last time I was there last year was in the same hotel as a very senior judge from the United States, who was actually working in Mexico for 2 years to try and help with a reform of the legal system, to try and make it more responsive, to try and make it more honest, try and make it more transparent. And she was convinced that you could do it, you know, that this was the moment now, because there have been changes in government, because Mexico wants to clean up its act, at least on some level. So I do think it's important that Amnesty, yes, put pressure on wherever it can. Really.
I seem to remember when it was at Nieto when he came into power, he sort of seemed to be a sort of, I don't know, Blair-like, he was quite the right analogy, but somebody who was going to bring about change. It seems that within a year, that had all completely gone.
He started out trying to bring all the forces together. He had a compact, he called it, for Mexico. But then, sort of a year in, this Ayotzinapa happened, and several other incidents like that. And that completely destroyed his credibility. And since then, I think he's just been getting the money. Thank you very much.
I was going to say on a kind of lower level, because you've been going there recently, your sort of analysis is that it's getting worse. Can you sense that in the way that people are in their everyday life? Does that play out? Is it a different atmosphere to you in more recent years, now that the appearances are...
I mean, for all that I've been saying, Mexico is a lovely, relaxed place, which makes the violence even more horrible, you know, when it occurs, because you never know when it is going to occur. I don't feel unsafe in Mexico, personally. The last time I was there was last year, and I do notice that now, it used to be great to take bus rides in Mexico. You would take a bus ride for 10 or 12 hours to all the different cities. People don't do that anymore. They catch a plane because it's much safer to go from one city to the next, and they know the airports are guarded. There is that kind of thing happening.
Because I was in Latin America when the students disappeared, and the impression I was getting from other travellers was that it was a lot more unsafe than it had been previously, and things like don't take buses. That kind of freedom you're used to in other countries. In Latin America, you just didn't have anymore, but had before in Mexico.
Yes, no, my Mexican friends always say don't take buses anymore. And the last time I did take an intercity bus, when we left one city, there was a police roadblock, then 5 miles further down there was an army roadblock, and they photographed everybody getting on the bus. So, you know, that it can be tense like that, but normally no.
Anybody else?
Yeah.
Yes.
Have things been changed now since the listening placement? Is it going to be, how's it going to be?
With Trump, you mean?
It's going to be really bad.
I think it is, unfortunately, yeah. Yeah, I think it is. I don't know what you think. Do you think he's actually going to build a wall? He'll probably try to do something, won't he?
I don't think
There's a fence anyway, isn't there?
There is a fence. Yeah.
Well, somebody said if you build a wall, there's always a tunnel.
Yeah.
It's the opposite.
There are lots of tunnels under that border. But his attitude, I mean, what did we say? 35 million Mexicans in the United States? You can't really throw all them out, can you?
How many are legal? I'm going to say, are they illegal?
They reckon about 2/3 of them are legal, yeah.
2/3 are legal.
Yeah. Or born there, lots of them are born there, that's the other thing.
Presumably business in California, well, farmers in California and places like that won't have it, will they? Because they won't be Labour.
Yeah.
So,
and maybe California become an independent republic. They voted Democrat, didn't they?
And Trump did have a real point about industry, though, didn't he? Because in fact, I mean, cheap labour just on the American border is very tempting. And
yes, no, as I said, Ford is transferring the whole of its production of small cars to Mexico.
Volkswagen.
Volkswagen mostly.
Yeah. The last run of the Beetles were built in Mexico.
Sorry, I didn't get
The last run of the original Volkswagen Beetle were made in Mexico.
Yes, yeah. They've stopped that now, I think.
So presumably he'll raise trade barriers, he'll scrap NAFTA.
Well, you said he will. I don't know if I don't know. Well, that is a whole other discussion, isn't it? I think that Peña Nieto would very much like to be friends with Trump. He invited him there. Do you remember that on the campaign trail? He invited him to Mexico, and he came out looking a complete fool because he didn't realise what Trump was going to say at all. It's. As I said, I've been going there for 40 years, and it's one of these infuriating countries where you think, if only they, things would just shift a little bit, it could be such a fantastic place, and it still is in most instances. It's just, well, we know it here, the political classes are not the best example of what Mexicans can be. Sorry.
Nick, thank you very much indeed. That was absolutely fascinating.
Good.
And,